Welcome to Radical Personal Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, for this entire year, I have spent my time focusing on the most action-oriented topics that I can imagine. I have focused you on things that you can do, and I have tried very hard to make my content actionable and not sensational. But here, as we close out 2025, an enormous news story has broken, and I'm going to talk about it and talk about what it means for your future, my future, and the future of the United States of America. But first, do you know what time of day many parents just flat out dread? The answer is math time. Here's what happens. Your child comes home from school, sits down with his math book and says, "All right, time to do my math homework. Dad, can you help me?" And you sit down and open the workbook, and there they are. 30, 40, sometimes 50 identical problems staring back at you. Problem after problem after problem. And your child just shuts down. Because you know, of course, if we ain't crying, we ain't doing math. "Dad, when am I ever going to use this?" And honestly, you don't have a good answer. Because if you can even remember how to factor a polynomial, you certainly can't remember the last time you had to do it at the grocery store, or last time you had to do it when paying your taxes, or last time you had to do it when accounting for hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud. And so you say, I don't know. Guess what? It doesn't have to be like that. What if, instead of non-stop, endless problems, and your child saying, "Dad, when do we ever have to use this?" What if every single problem were first introduced with a story, wherein our wonderful friend Fred, our zany protagonist, needs every single math concept from 1 + 1 through linear algebra to solve some problem that he has gotten into in his life? Welcome to Life of Fred. Life of Fred is where we wrap mathematics in a story. And your child follows Fred every year through adventures that actually require the math that he's learning in order to solve the problem. What might this do for you and for your children? Well, listen to this testimonial that came in from a mother of a Life of Fred student. "Hi, Stan," written to the author. "Hi, Stan. I just want to let you know that Life of Fred has changed our lives. My 9-year-old daughter has hated math from the beginning. We tried several different math curriculums over the last few years. Nothing worked. Her standardized test scores were very low, and so were my spirits. I started to feel like a failure because she just wasn't getting it, and everything math-related was a battle. I was told about Life of Fred, but I hesitated to try it because nothing else had worked, so I figured that wouldn't either. I finally decided to give it a try, and she loved it. I knew she loved it, but I wanted to see if she was really learning math, so I gave her a standardized test again. After just 2 months of using Fred, apples to dogs, her math score went from 25 to 94. I couldn't believe it. Needless to say, we will continue through the elementary series this fall when she's in 4th grade. Thank you so much. I was considering stopping homeschooling until we found Fred, but now we're on a good track again. I can't thank you enough." Friends, Life of Fred is a company that I purchased from the author, Stan Schmidt, because I believe that one of the best things that we can do to improve our nation is to help our children fall in love with math again. You can use Life of Fred as a standalone math curriculum, or you can use Life of Fred to supplement whatever math curriculum you're already using and getting great results with. Either way works fine. If you'd like to check it out, read free sample chapters of all of our books at lifeoffred.com, lifeoffred.com. We offer free shipping on any number of books from 1 to 100. You can go to shop.lifeoffred.com and order today. shop.lifeoffred.com. Now, to the story. I'm going to begin by playing about 3 minutes of audio from a report that was published on X. This comes from independent reporter Nick Shirley, and it's the beginning part of a 42-minute documentary where he is discussing fraud allegations in the great state of Minnesota in the United States of America. Listen to the first few minutes to understand the story.
Hello, we'd like to ask where the money's going. What do you guys think about the fraud that's taking place here in Minnesota?
I don't think anybody is enabling fraud to happen.
Hold Governor Walz accountable for this.
What was this money spent on? 1.26 million. What was that money spent on? To earn any kids?
Answer the question. Are there children? There's no children inside this building. Potentially the largest fraud scandal in U.S. history is taking place in Minnesota, as literally billions of dollars have been funneled through Somali-ran fraudulent businesses. So much fraud, it could actually almost replace the entire GDP of Somalia. These fraudsters have worked hand in hand with the Minnesota government as they enabled billions of dollars to be given to fraudulent businesses underneath welfare purposes. Some of this money eventually landed in the hands of terrorist groups in Somalia like the Al-Shabaab, and others enriched themselves all at the US taxpayers' expense. And in this video we will break down all of the fraud from start to finish, from going to the fraudulent businesses and confronting the people who are making millions of dollars from the government. And we will also be confronting the incompetent government leaders who let this fraud happen. And to make this happen, I met up with a man who's been doing his own investigation for years now, as he has seen the fraud firsthand. His name is David. Let's get into this and be prepared to be shocked. How deep is this fraud here inside of Minnesota?
It is far worse than anybody can imagine. You heard it's 7 to 10 billion and maybe more, and now the numbers have been revised and put out there publicly that they think it's more like 8 billion. How I got involved is that where my office is here in Minneapolis, I'm sort of in the heart of all of this fraud, and I would see these child care centers. I said, well, there aren't any kids there. It's the middle of the day, and all I see are a couple of guys standing out front smoking. And then I'd go by another daycare, and I'd see the same thing. I said, well, where do these kids play? And so I started to go online and look, and I said, this place is licensed for 80 children. They had 0 children. Every time I went by there, they never had a single child there. Then I started to see all these transportation companies going around, and it was always a Somali driver. And I said, well, that's great. They're out there transportation, contributing, but they never had a passenger, never, ever once. And I said, well, what is all this transportation? What are they doing? So then I found out that in Minnesota, they have something called non-emergency medical transportation. So this is going to the dentist's office, therapy, whatever it might be. And I said, well, how many of these companies are there? And the research came back that there are 1,020 of them, and more than 800 of them are Somali-owned. Nobody from the state of Minnesota ever cross-checks to see if any rides were ever actually provided. All they did was write the check.
So right here we have all this paperwork. And how are you getting all this information about the fraud?
A lot of it is through my own research. And then I have some contacts at the Capitol going back many, many years. And so the data that I'm getting is 100% accurate, coming directly from research done by people at the state Capitol.
All this paperwork right here, what are we looking at?
The areas of fraud that I have numbers for are mostly related to childcare. This is massive fraud that is beyond anyone's imagination, the scope. And so, for example, there's a childcare not far from here in Minneapolis that has two childcares listed at the same address. And together, they're licensed supposedly for 120 children. I have never seen a single child there ever, and I've been by that place at least 100 times.
These Somalians, these groups are setting up these daycares, these childcare centers, getting money from the government, but there's no kids.
No kids. Never had any of them. They're all fraught with violations, and even though they have these violations, they're still in operation, and they're still getting money. And it's millions of dollars for every one of them every year.
So I'll let you, if that whets your appetite and you're interested, I'll let you go ahead and follow the link in the show notes, and you can watch the full report from Nick Shirley. Time will tell. This was published 3 days ago as the time of recording on December 26, 2025. It currently has 120 million views on Twitter, on X. And time will tell. We'll see what happens with this story. I would guess, because kind of how these things go, I would guess that Nick probably made some mistakes. I would guess that there's probably some quibbles around the edges because it's really hard to do a good job with fact checking when you're an independent journalist or a couple of things. That's why we need both muckrakers, and we need kind of good, solid newsrooms with full teams of people fact checking every detail of a story. So I would guess that there will be a little bit on the edge, but I would say that probably my guess is that a year from now, the majority of what Nick presents in this story will have been evidenced out and generally proven to be accurate. I say that not because I have any inside knowledge or information of it. I'm an interested spectator. But I say that because it fits more or less with my view of the world, which I will explain to you, and you can guess, you can judge it for yourself as I explain it to you. Whenever we're dealing with this kind of governmental fraud, I'm reminded of the saying by some bank robber, Mr. Bank Robber, why did you rob the banks? And the response, of course, is, well, that's where all the money is. That's where all the money is. And any kind of fraud and any kind of robbery, which is what this is, by the way, this is flat out theft. I don't like the word fraud because this is theft. Fraud of this kind is theft. This kind of theft is being done for exactly the same reason that if you want money, you go rob a bank. Well, the banks don't have very much money now, but the government has lots of money, and they will send you some if you just fill out the paperwork. And I've watched this for years, sadly. I try to keep my podcast not particularly sensationalistic, and it's frustrating to know what to do with it. But if you go back to the PPP loans, and you waited a couple of years back during the pandemic, you waited a couple of years and you come back and you go through the paperwork, the amount of fraud that was committed and theft, outright theft that was committed through that program is just shocking. And this is another expression of it. And I believe that it's important that we face these facts very clearly and very directly so that we can have some kind of idea on where we're likely to go from here and what is likely to happen. Now, I've talked in some past episodes about things like government loans and government financing. I don't see any way back from the problems of government financing and from deficit spending. I was hopeful a year ago that perhaps there would be some kind of change. Is with the prior election, with the election of President Trump in the recent, a year ago, right? January was a year ago when he was coming into office. I was hopeful that if anything good happened, perhaps there would be some kind of progress with the Department of Government Efficiency, the so-called DOGE, initially led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. And I thought, well, maybe there would be some kind of insight into this thing. Well, as best I can tell, it was more or less an ineffective catastrophe. I think in preparing for the show, I checked a couple of pieces of data, and I said, well, could there be some kind of improvement? And if you're looking for, here's what AI told me. DOGE made notable progress in specific areas, particularly in reducing the federal workforce and targeting certain expenditures. Workforce reductions, 9% decline. Contract cancellations and savings, $200 billion. Regulatory reforms, overhauled the federal acquisition regulation. Public and political impact. DOGE shifted perceptions of government waste, inspiring state-level efforts, for example in Iowa, and highlighting issues like redundant programs. So, was there any actual progress? Well, you judge for yourself, but that's what AI says was the results of it. Shortcomings and criticisms: no net savings or spending reduction. Federal spending increased in 2025 with a deficit growing by over $2.1 trillion, $6.5 billion per day since DOGE's inception. Claimed savings were often unverifiable, inflated, for example, mislabeling an $8 million contract as $8 billion, or based on ceiling values rather than actual cuts. The Cato Institute noted no noticeable effect on spending trajectories, and critics labeled it a dishonest sham that focused on symbolic rather than strategic reforms. Operational disruptions. Cuts caused inefficiencies such as toilet paper shortages, delayed services like weather alerts and IRS operations, and rehiring costs that offset savings. It sowed chaos in agencies like HHS and NOAA, disproportionately affecting vulnerable programs and leading to lawsuits. Lack of transparency and legitimacy, blah, 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 internal leadership issues. So I would say that on the whole, DOGE was ineffective. And that saddens me. That saddened me at the time. I hoped that perhaps there would be some way through. I don't blame necessarily anybody. I don't think that, Elon Trump. I like that. We should use that that nickname in the future. Elon Musk, I think he seemed like he really cared and tried really hard. I don't know. You always wonder, how much is it possible to figure someone out based upon public stuff? But my perception is that he really cared, really tried, was really excited about the issue. He put a lot at stake. And who knows? I think President Trump sort of cared, and then we basically wound up with political reality that it didn't work out. And I watched a lot of the disruption, and it just makes me sad. Anyway, I'm not here to moan and whine. My point was that over the last year, I hoped that there would be some kind of positive progress, because as you know, I've been ringing this bell about government debt and deficit for many years now, and there has been no effective positive progress. So what does that mean? Well, as far as I'm concerned, it means that government default is at some point and in some time inevitable. Now, the actual shape that it takes, is that an end-of-the-world emergency with a collapse of the dollar? Is that a painful restructuring of things? I tend away from the catastrophist position towards it's just a long and painful restructuring of things. I think it'll be a combination of various forms of default, but I don't have any more knowledge of the future than you do. Just that's what makes sense to me. I think the sensationalist versions are probably not the most likely. But I would say that this current version of the theft that is being alleged and is some of the most destabilizing things that can possibly be done. And this is deeply, deeply concerning. I'd like to share with you some categorical ideas, some things that I think are categorically true. And you need to assess them for yourself. And then based upon whether you think I'm right or you think I'm wrong about these ideas, perhaps it will illuminate what path you should take. The reason I'm doing this is that I think that if we can talk about certain truths and then you make decisions based upon those truths, you make better decisions. So, for example, if we say that water always moves down due to the force of gravity, and you recognize that here's a canyon should I build my house at the bottom of the canyon, then we can understand that at some point in time, that canyon is going to flood, because at some point in time, the canyon will be filled with water. I know this is a dumb example, but it's the best I got. So what can you do? Well, if you know that, your house will be safer from water if you build it on a mountaintop than if you build it down in the canyon. Now, I'm not telling you whether to build the house or not build the house, but if you're going to build the house down in the canyon, you certainly shouldn't make that house your only house that you own or your entire net worth. And you certainly should put in place some kind of warning system for yourself about there being water that's coming. And there should be multiple backup systems so that if it's raining way up in the mountains 500 yards upstream, you'll immediately know about it. And that might be a time for you to go to your mountaintop house. So that's what I'm trying to deal with these things on this level, that you see if these things are categorically true. And if they are, then you try to figure out either what to do or not to do, or what kind of warning systems to put in place. The first thing I think is categorically true is you can either have open borders or you can have a welfare state. You can have one or the other. You cannot have both. Now, if I were elected emperor of the universe, I would choose open borders and no welfare state. I think that would solve a lot of issues. In my experience, dealing with topics of racism and talking to people about racism, I think that most people don't particularly care all that much about the color of skin that their neighbor has, if they know that their neighbor is not stealing from them in the middle of the night. But if your neighbor has a different color of skin than you have, and you know your neighbor is stealing from you in the middle of the night, then now you have a pretty obvious target to take out your anger at being stolen from. Then what happens is if your neighbor is stealing from you in the middle of the night, and this continues for night after night, week after week, day after day, and you go to the police and you say, police, arrest this neighbor, and the police don't arrest the neighbor, then pretty soon you start taking things into your own hands. and people start getting hung from trees. And they start disappearing in the middle of the night, never to be heard from again. And that's where all this ends if this doesn't stop. Because in America, we have this concept called vigilante justice. And we're generally rightly opposed to vigilante justice, because vigilante justice is often not justice at all. But if the justice system does not deliver justice, if the emperor does not do his fundamental duty to his people, if the king does not do his fundamental duty to his subjects, then the subjects start getting restless and they start doing their duty. And vigilante justice, for all of its excess and all of its wrong, is closer to justice than what the government official was doing. In the heart of every man beats this desire and this knowledge of justice. God has put objective moral reasoning into all of us. Some of us are very good at discussing what that objective moral reasoning is. Some of us are very good at articulating theories and ideas about right and wrong and the technicalities. Some of us aren't so good, and we just kind of look over there and say, that bad, you go away. But in the heart of every man and every woman beats a desire for justice. And a king, an emperor, a president, a governor, any kind of civil magistrate of any kind must maintain order in line with that objective morality that beats in the heart of every man, that God has revealed in creation itself, what in Christian theology we would call general revelation. Right, the universal knowledge of mankind, of the natural law, governed by the conscience. So when government defends that, then government has its rightful place. When a king defends his subjects, the subjects will stand up and support the king. When a king doesn't defend his subjects and perform his kingly duties well, then the subjects will rise up and depose the king. So it's important that magistrates do their job, and if the people see the magistrates doing their job, then the people will sit back and they will wait for the wheels of justice to go through. And the people will sit back and say, well, the wheels of justice grind slowly, but that's better than vigilantism. We'll just be patient. And you'll have people like me who will say, be patient, be patient, be patient. And you'll see some guilty people get off, and you'll say, well, better the benefit of the doubt. But there's a point in time in which people start to flip. And even the reserved people start to flip. By the way, I'm here to tell you, I'm a fairly reserved person, generally speaking, not prone to rashness of temper, generally pretty calm, can endure quite a lot. I'm not as calm as I used to be when you see these things. And so if the government authorities will step in and do their job, then things will get better. If they don't, I don't know what to say, but there's a lot of people who are going to fly off the handle, and that is universally bad. Sorry, I got a little carried away. Let's go back to the point. Okay, number one, you can have open borders, or you can have a welfare state. In the modern United States of America, we have chosen a welfare state. So what is, by definition, a welfare state? By definition, a welfare state is when the government takes from these people with threat of violence and gives to those people over there. The government tries to solve a problem. We're going to steal from these people by the use of the taxman, so that we can give to those people. And there's a sense in which most of us affirm that that's probably the right thing to do at some point in time. Right? That's the reason why the Robin Hood story is such an enduring story. Whenever you read Robin Hood, you are cheering for Robin Hood. Because you're seeing the excess and you're saying, well, the poor people over there are getting the wrong thing, right? That's an example of what I'm saying, is that in the heart of every man beats this sense. And depending on how the author has written Robin Hood, if you see that the king is stealing and not fulfilling his kingly duties, then you cheer for Robin Hood to steal from the king, even though you know what he's doing is stealing. And so I think most people, we'd like a bit of the welfare state, right? We'd like old people not to be on the streets. We'd like old people to not die of hunger. We'd like poor people to kind of sort of be taken care of. Like, we kind of like these things. And so we say, well, I might not really like it. I probably wouldn't have voted for it. I'm kind of a hardcore, that shouldn't happen kind of guy. But in reality, it's not so bad. At least my money's being given to the poor little old lady. But when you wake up and you see that your money is being stolen from you at the point of a gun, the implied threat of a point of a gun, and then that money is being washed through this giant money laundering system that is making people who are not like you and do not share your values and do not like you, and is making them rich while you struggle, friend, you've got a revolution on your hand. That's about where we are in the United States of America. There is a revolution brewing on these many issues. Now, I think that revolution could be stopped. You watch it and you see. But you cannot have this kind of situation continue. You cannot have those two things coexist. You cannot have the welfare state and open borders. And the people are trying to say something about that. Right? I, of course, think back to the classic example of the different boxes. There's various versions of it, but it's been for 200 years in in American history. The idea that there are 4 boxes to be used in the defense of liberty. The soapbox, the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. And the idea behind the American culture is that these things should be used in that order. The soapbox is what I'm doing now. Getting on a microphone. The old days, it was you stand up on a little wooden box in the street corner and you cry out to your citizens. Getting on a microphone and saying things that you think need to be said for anybody who wants to hear those things. That's the fundamental, most important thing that Americans prize. The entire nation is held together by the first 10 amendments. And of those 10 amendments, there are about 5 that people know. And the most fundamental is the first, which includes the right to free speech. And as we've talked about in other podcast episodes, the right to free speech is not merely a legal right. It's not merely, the meme that you hear. Well, freedom of speech does not protects you from the government, but it doesn't protect you from the consequences of your actions. That is, of course, obviously true. It's also a stupid midwit meme that implies that demonstrates a total lack of acknowledgement that all rights have to exist in a culture that says these are values. They are rights because they are values, right? The right to free speech, where you are protected from the government, from the government infringing on your speech, is a technical legal truth. But the broad-based support of free speech as a social value is what is necessary in order to keep the government in check. So that's why people support free speech. Technically, the right of freedom of religion is not enough just to say the government shall not establish religion, but that the people have to have a similar culture that they uphold. And we could go through all the amendments across the board. So the soapbox is the least violent. The ballot box and the jury box is where things start to get serious. And as you watch the whiplash in American society right now, the elections going back and forth and swinging wildly, you see the frustration and the lack of peace and consistency, the lack of calmness in the American populace. That's the people exercising their duty at the ballot box. One of the most fundamental issues that is absolutely important is that of encouraging confidence in elections. And that's why over the last years, as we are eroding confidence in elections consistently, that has been an extremely dangerous thing. The people need to believe that they have the ability to make change at the ballot box. I hope that we make changes. I hope that people are confident in the value in the elections that are there. Time will tell. Then you have the jury box, the ability to get a fair trial of your peers. And once again, you see that having public challenges. Now, there are two sides to the jury box. The one side is that you have people's confidence that they can be tried by a jury of their peers. The idea of peerage has changed a lot. And I think you have a lot of people who are frustrated about that. When I was growing up, I had a lot of confidence. Well, if I go before a jury, the people will understand me. I'm in a nation of people that'll be like me, and I'll get my fair day in court. That was a belief that I had when I was a boy. I do not have that belief anymore. And so that's dangerous. Then the flip side of it is you basically have the concept of jury nullification, which is the ultimate check to make sure that the jury box still performs. And then the fourth box is that of the cartridge box. And you're starting to see that, right? You see, and it's nothing new, by the way. I'm not an extremist on this stuff. If you go back to the 1970s, you had thousands of bombings across the country. So it's easy to get out of hand, but it feels like violence is increasing. And the challenge of violence is that there is no person who can be protected consistently from violence if you have an intelligent and motivated opponent. Maybe the president might be able to be protected. Evidently, poorly, right? But maybe you can have dozens and dozens and dozens of people go to work every day to protect one man, and maybe they'll be able to keep him alive. American history says that's not actually the case. Ironically, by the way, I think being president of the United States is the most dangerous job classification in American workers. If you actually look at the percentage of presidents who have died while performing their duties, and also the percentage of presidents that have been shot while performing their duties, it's pretty shocking, right? 4 assassinated presidents, and how many have been shot? At least 4, if not that didn't die, that weren't assassinated. So the percentages are pretty rough. But maybe things are different. Maybe with the modern, new, and improved Secret Service, maybe everything is better. Time will tell. But you cannot protect the senators. You cannot protect the congressmen. And even if you could, you cannot protect your state representatives. You cannot protect your mayors. Anybody on earth can be killed by any one other person who is sufficiently motivated. Right? It's not hard. And so we've got to stay away from that level of violence, which means that in order for this to work, the people have to gain confidence that the governors are just, that they're doing their job. So what does that mean at the moment? If we want to avoid the violence, what does that mean at the moment? Well, theft must be punished as theft. Fraud is not a victimless crime. Fraud is theft. And what is the proper judgment and the proper point of justice for theft? I'll tell you what I believe it is. By the way, it's actually not what is often always reflected in modern American systems. But I'll give you my dream world. What would happen? Well, if somebody is accused of theft, first, there would be a full and complete investigation. Then, there would be a trial. The individual accused of theft is brought to court. The evidence is presented, and a jury rules on that evidence as guilty or not guilty. If the person is not guilty, they will be freed, all of his or her rights restored, and we will just say it never happened. That's why I'm not always great at it, but I try to use words like alleged. I try not to engage in extremist forms of speech. I have a lot of room to grow, but I try. Right? These words matter. This matters. Until you are convicted in a court of law, I think we should be very careful with what is alleged and what we say that someone has done. But if someone is found guilty, there must be restitution. And this is what is so broken about our modern system, where instead of making restitution for straightforward crimes like theft, we've come into this system of prison, which does not make restitution. And this is a bit of a personal bugaboo. Let me just describe it. If you look at the way that the modern system works in many cases. I don't want to say all. I'm not a legal scholar. I'm just sharing my understanding as an ordinary citizen of the way the modern legal system works. Is first of all, you have the government is supposed to be the one to investigate it. And does the government investigate? Well, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But let's pretend that you can get the government to investigate a crime and you can convince the government's attorney to bring charges against somebody. That's not easy, especially in time of overloaded police departments, overloaded detectives, overloaded prosecutors. But let's say that you can do that. So then the government is the one bringing the suit against the alleged criminal. Then assume that the criminal is found guilty. Well, in many cases, the judge will say, you're found guilty of theft, and so therefore you're off to prison for 20 years. Well, what happens in that situation? Person goes off for 20 years. A private corporation gets rich housing the prisoner. If the judge has not ordered restitution made to the victim for the theft, the person does 20 years, spends 20 years in prison, surrounded by other criminals. While there, gets to find out about all kinds of new schemes and frauds and scams and all kinds of crazy new things that he can do. Gets out and has a whole new ability to do new crimes, new contacts, new networks of people, new gangs, and has not been restored. All it did was just spend some time in prison. Now, I use 20 years optimistically. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 1 year. But, and again, sometimes the judge does order restitution, as he should. But if he doesn't order restitution, the victim is still out his money. It's a crazy system. What should happen? Well, if somebody is found guilty of theft, what he should do is be required to repay the victim for the theft. So if you stole $7 million from Medicaid, you should be required to pay back $7 million plus extra back to Medicaid. And in order to do that, you have to work. And if you are not willing to work, then you should be forced by law to work. And you shouldn't go to prison and be surrounded by criminals. You should have to work out in the free world, surrounded by moral, upstanding men who don't break the law, who will instruct you in proper morality, so that when you have finished making restitution for your crimes, you will never do it again. And by the way, it always has to be extra. Right? If I come to your house and I sneak into your house at night and I steal $1,000 from you, and I do that because I don't have $1,000 and I can't borrow $1,000, so I come in at night and I steal $1,000 from you. And then I get caught. And all I have to do is pay back $1,000. Well, big deal. Even if I had to work to pay back $1,000, well, I had to go to work to pay $1,000. I got caught this time, but I probably only got caught one out of every 2 times, or probably 1 out of every 4, or 1 out of every 10 times. And so I got caught this time. In order for me to be incentivized not to steal the $1,000, it has to hurt. So if the consequence for getting caught is that I have to go and I have to earn $1,000, and then I have to earn another $200 or another $500 to pay extra money, then now there's actually a proper incentive for me to say, man, it would have been easier for me to just go work and earn $1,000 myself instead of stealing it from your house. And then you as the victim, you are made right because not only is your $1,000 restored, but another $200 or another $500 is restored to you, which hopefully starts to make you right for this inconvenience that you have experienced for the theft. So in an ideal world, if I were emperor of the universe, that's what I would like to see. Unfortunately, we're left in this messy world where none of us are emperor of the universe, and we have to figure out how to move towards that standard, towards that ideal. So what is going to happen? What happens from here? Well, either the system of justice does its job and those wins are publicized and the people build confidence in their elected leaders, or a whole bunch more people are going to join them. A whole bunch more people are going to join them. there's probably a percentage of the population that is always going to do the right thing, no matter what. There's probably also a percentage of the population that is never going to do that is always going to do the wrong thing. I'm getting my mixed up here. Always going to do the wrong thing, no matter what. But there are a whole bunch of people in the middle that will do either the right thing or the wrong thing based upon what they see the people around them doing and what they see the people around them getting away with. The image that sticks in my mind, years ago I heard Jack Spirko talk about this, and the image that sticks in my mind is the scene that he described of open season on fishing day. So let's say the salmon fishing licenses are open, and salmon season starts on the 21st of the month at 8:00 in the morning. And so you go out on that morning and you go out to the river and you look all up and down the river. There's a whole bunch of people that are sitting there, and everyone's sitting there waiting, drinking their coffee, visiting with their friends. Every man has a pole in his hand. He's ready to go in, but it's not 8:00 yet. So he's ready, but it's not 8:00 yet. And you get to about 7:56. And finally, someone's like, good enough. Now everybody out there knows it's not good enough. It's not 8:00. But at 7:56, one guy tosses his line in the water. And then whoosh, like a wave, it spreads across the fishermen. And across the fishermen now, 95% of people have their line in the water. I've never seen that personally. I'm not sure it's true or it's not true, but it's pretty true with a lot of other experiences that I've had in my life. The times when I've done wrong things, and I remember I bullied a kid when I was in middle school. The times when I've done that, the only time when I've done that is when everyone else was picking on him, and I wanted to fit in with the cool kids. And so I went ahead and fit in with him. And man, thankfully I was able to apologize to him years later, but it was awful. That's not who I was. That's not how my parents raised me, but I went along with the peer pressure. The other story I had, I remember, I hate mobs, by the way. I hate mobs. And I hate mobs because of one experience that changed my life. When I was in about 8th or 9th grade, something like that, I was in my school's musical theater performance of Beauty and the Beast. I was a cast member, chorus member. And in Beauty and the Beast, there's the mob song. And of course, you're in the mob, and you're going to go up and get the beast. And I remember being on stage. And I remember singing that song. It makes chills come to mind right now. You know the song, right? Through the mist, through the woods, through the darkness and the shadows, it's a nightmare, but it's one exciting ride. Say a prayer, then we're there at the drawbridge of a castle, and there's something truly terrible inside. It's a beast, he's got fangs, razor-sharp ones, massive paws, killer claws for the feast. Hear him roar, see him foam, but we're not coming home till he's dead. Good and dead, kill the beast. I remember singing that song. And I remember just being filled with anger, filled with hatred, filled with rage for something that doesn't even exist. There is no beast. And yet those emotions engulfed my body. And I don't know. It was one of those moments where I realized I am probably capable of anything, any crime, any murder. I'm capable of anything wrong if I were in the right circumstances, surrounded by the people. If I can gin up the feelings of murderous rage for a made-up story about a 16th century castle with a magical beast in it, and I'm holding my pitchfork with my boys, saying, like, we're going to get him. What else am I capable of? When it's actually real. If I can feel that way on stage, and my sister is raped, and it's actually real, what am I capable of? If I can feel that on stage, and it's my money that's stolen, or it's my brother that's killed, what am I capable of? And the answer is I'm capable of the worst of it. The absolute worst. And so we have to make these systems function. We have to make these systems work well. The people who are stealing must be held accountable for their crimes. You don't get to, we're not, a society that allows crime to continue unpunished will not endure. It will absolutely collapse. It has to be punished. And it has to be punished severely because there must be such obvious destruction on the other side of theft that it's enough to restrain the evil that lurks in the heart of all of us. Where we say, man, I'd do it if I could get away with it. You cannot get away with it. And we cannot allow our society to exist that will get away with it. I know I'm preaching at you. I don't like to do that. I try to stay far away from it, but sometimes you have to do it. Friends, we have to make our societies function. If our society does not function, all we are going to retreat to is just clannish separatism. And I'm going to get mine. We have to hold the noble virtues up. We have to rebuild a society in which a man says, no, damn it, I'm not taking money from the government because I am here to take care of my family. We have to build that kind of society again where a man has pride in the way that he takes care of himself and the way that he takes care of his wife and children. We don't build a society that will endure because we say, well, it's okay, just take a little help. Now, none of us can ever actually follow through. We all need help. But we live under the illusion. We have to maintain the illusion that we don't. It's a useful and important fiction. Right? That's why when you see a man who's down, and he's a man who takes pride in himself and his children, you never, ever give him money directly. You never make it possible for him to say no, because even though he needs it, you have to get it to him in a way that he feels some justification. Could be for services earned. It could be for slipped around the back. It could be stuff just shows up. You have to maintain that kind of thing in society, or you wind up with collapse. One of the most shocking things to me about being back in the United States after spending a lot of time abroad over the last years is the complete and total transformation of stores. Everything is locked up now. I go to Walmart to buy a stick of deodorant, and I have to wait and find a Walmart employee to unlock the cabinet to hand me deodorant. Now, I'm pretty used to that, actually, because I've spent a whole lot of my life traveling. And that's pretty normal in many places around the world. But that was not normal before I left America. That was not normal in the culture I grew up in. Now, to see that in my own country where we can't even have deodorant on the shelves at Walmart, that is sad. Breaks my heart to see it. Not preaching at you. Just, I guess I am, but I don't mean to. What I mean is I'm just sharing my experiences. So what do you do from here? Where do we go? To the extent that you have the ability, I think that you try to impact it. Right? Make the soapbox and the ballot box work. Use your soapbox. Use the ballot box. Use the jury box if you're in there. I don't know. I don't want to black pill on you. If these kinds of things are not exposed, if criminals are not arrested, then and justice is not passed, then we're in for a difficult time, in which case there will be a retrenchment back to you and your local community. I'm not a Minnesotan. I'm probably never going to be one. But if there are not people arrested and brought to trial and prosecuted fully and proven to either be not guilty or proven to be guilty, and if justice is not done, there will wind up being violence in Minnesota. In the heart of every man beats this thirst for justice. And if he doesn't get it, he rises up and tries to take it. And that is the most dangerous thing that exists in human history, because usually in that moment, so much excess is done that it's just flat out injustice. And then we spend decades and centuries arguing about it. It's interesting to make these historical arguments about, well, were we right when we did such and such, or were we wrong when we did such and such? Those things are interesting when you live in overall a pretty just society. But if you don't live in a just society, you stop caring about all that stuff from the past, and you start caring a lot about the injustice that you are experiencing today. So we have been given civilization. We have to maintain it. I don't know what to tell you about to do with it. I don't know. I guess maybe I am kind of blackpilling here. I hope that there's a solution. Otherwise, I guess you protect yourself from it and you try to get away from people who are going to harm you. You try to get away from people who are going to steal from you. You try to fall back to your clan, to the people who are like you. And it's not very fun, but you can still live a good life in those situations. So I thought when I started this subject, I thought I was going to have something more positive and encouraging to say. But alas, here we are, and I'm not sure what else to say, positive, encouraging, other than just that if you see injustice, I guess here's where I do like to close on a positive note. Okay. This is why it's important that when things come to you, you do the right thing. What does that mean? Does that mean your personal activity? Yes, it does. Meaning that the most important man to pay attention to is the man in the glass. Right? He's the one who counts. And you can live your whole life, and if the man in the glass is happy, then that's a good thing. Even if everything around is wrong, at least be able to look at the man in the glass. That's what matters. Now, also though, what matters is this is why you have to expose evil whenever you find it in small measures. If you shine a light on evil when it's small, it can be dealt with. But if you don't shine a light on evil when it is small, then it just grows and it grows and it grows and it grows. And I used to resist, I still resist, right? I used to resist the doomsayers of society because their temperament doesn't match my temperament, right? I'm not a prophet crying in the wilderness who wants to stand up and say, well, here's where this welfare system is going to go. But I have to say that the majority of the people that I never liked in the past, right, the fundamentalist Bible-thumping preachers and the wacky doomsayer and whatnot, they weren't wrong. They were just early. They weren't wrong. They were just early. It just takes a few decades more than people think for things to kind of work out. But if each person will do his job to expose a little evil where you are, shine a little light on it, and disinfect whatever things are wrong near you, then, maybe that has an impact on a societal level. Maybe that matters. I think it can and it should. And so that's what props to this journalist for going out, creating a story. If you know of some kind of fraud or you know of some kind of wrongdoing, expose it, and let's be those who involve with that. Let's close with a poem. When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you king for a day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts the most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. Some people may think you a straight-shooting chum and call you a wonderful guy, but the guy in the glass says you're only a bum if you can't look him straight in the eye. He's the fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear up to the end, and you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the man in the glass is your friend. You may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartaches and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. One more. This one by Edgar Guest. Courage isn't a brilliant dash, a daring deed in a moment's flash. It isn't an instantaneous thing, born of despair with a sudden spring. It isn't a creature of flickered hope or the final tug at a slipping rope, but it's something deep in the soul of a man that is working always to serve some plan. Courage isn't the last resort in the work of life or the game of sport. It isn't a thing that a man can call at some future time when he's apt to fall. If he hasn't it now, he will have it not, when the strain is great and the pace is hot. For who would strive for a distant goal must always have courage within his soul. Courage isn't a dazzling light that flashes and passes away from sight. It's a slow, unwavering, ingrained trait with the patience to work and the strength to wait. It's part of a man when his skies are blue. It's part of him when he has work to do. The brave man never is freed of it. He has it when there is no need of it. Courage was never designed for show. It isn't a thing that can come and go. It's written in victory and defeat, and every trial a man may meet. It's part of his hours, his days, and his years, back of his smiles and behind his tears. Courage is more than a daring deed. It's the breath of life and a strong man's creed. Be courageous wherever you are today. Be back with you soon.